everyone. You've interrupted. No. You've come upon Conversations with Kush podcast, and I'm Molly the Kush RN. And tonight we have two incredible women that I am honored to be sitting down with. My good friend Lynn Wachtler and Angelique Zerillo, co-founders of the North Bloom magazine. So welcome, ladies. I'm so honored to have you here. So you are editor-in-chief.
Correct.
And what is your title, Lynn?
I'm a contributor, co-founder.
Okay. I like it. And then your partner, Eric
Ing.
is in charge of the sales and kind of pushing the magazine out. So
Yep, advertising. Yep,
Yeah.
because we're a free publication
okay.
out in the marketplace. We want to make sure that consumers can access us easily, and they don't even need to throw a quarter into a machine to grab us, so it's important.
Yeah. Lynn, this is your baby. I feel like you have been talking about this for quite some time. I remember you asking me several months ago, like, telling me about it, what you're going to do. And, asking did I want to write an article? And, I don't think I was quite ready for that, but, it's wonderful. I'm kind of an observer, I guess. I like to call myself or consider myself. I love the teamwork of like Lynn having this beautiful vision and then inviting Angelique to come in and just like bring it all to fruition. And I just to see the two of you just like put your heads together and come up with this beautiful publication. I'm blown away by the beauty of it and the overall sentiment of it, like to hold something in your hand, to be a print publication, to go into my doctor's office and see something like this sitting next to, while I'm waiting to go in to talk to my doctor, like this is incredible. This is exactly what we need.
It is.
Yeah.
It's been missing.
Yeah, it has. So tell me how this all came about. How did it get started?
Well, the one thing I want to say is, an idea is just an idea without people who can execute. So honestly, we would not be here and you would not be seeing that if it wasn't, for the tremendous talent. I've really never had the opportunity to work, with any kind of multimedia like this, but it's always been a dream of mine since I was very young, honestly. And believe it or not, I dropped out of nursing school after 3 years because I wanted to explore other opportunities, and went over to the journalism school at St. Thomas and talked to a very well-known journalist who was on TV at the time, and we talked about journalism. And he said, kid, I'm going to tell you right now, you're never going to cut it. It's tough out there. It's a man's world, and I don't really see you as the type of person who could put a microphone in someone's face and say, how do you feel, now that your house burned down and your children were inside? And he said, I think you should go back to nursing school. And so I decided, after consideration, I studied some social justice and took some Spanish classes and traveled around Central America. And then I did go back to nursing school, but it never diminished my love of just wanting to tell stories and being interested in what other people have to say.
Yeah.
And then in my business that I previously had, I did, some writing of blogs and wrote my own copy for a website. But this year I was just really thinking this long runway into legalization, and just meeting so many small businesses who just have these wonderful, great stories, and just being really enthralled with the health and wellness aspect of cannabis, and seeing that is probably where the future is going to go when you just kind of quiet down and think about what's my role as a healthcare professional, and with a love of writing and a real love of connecting with people, and it just, one day I was meditating and I just had this strong feeling, honestly, intuition of explore the idea of a magazine. And I thought, wow, that's just seems like a big thing to explore. But I have a curious and active mind, and
you do.
I just couldn't let it go, and made some phone calls, and a number of people said, "Prince dead, you should give up your dream." And we as women are often told to give up our dreams and play small, and we just do it. And then later we have regrets about what we didn't do. And I'm towards the end of my career, and I really thought, I'm going to regret this if I don't at least explore it to the fullest, and just started, doing more connecting, more networking. And then I was put in touch with Angelique and had been just a huge fan seeing her on her Zoom with Elizabeth and Sarah Tupper. And I thought, I'm just going to call her and see, what happens, knowing that the execution of something like this, as a family practice person, I know when to call the cardiologist. Right. You know what I mean? And so I think of Angelique as like the specialist who's got the creds, the expertise and talent to really be able to pull this together and to execute it. Because honestly, I was sitting with a lot of pages and beautiful stories of people we know, but with not the expertise to pull it together in the beautiful artistic way that she did. Yeah. And when I saw it, honestly, I just was like speechless, just because it's just beyond anything I could have dreamed up myself, you know? So thank you for that. First, thank you for saying, I get emotional talking about it because we're talking about dreams.
Yeah, absolutely.
And right. And
Lynn and I have shared a number, we've only been together in person twice since she called me, about August 10th, 8th, somewhere around there. It was not that long ago. So the fact that we got this done and it's in the hands of people here in Minnesota, this feels like a Herculean feat, but I'm incredibly proud of it. And so the fact, I feel so connected to this human, and it's such a bizarre thing and a quick on-ramp, of a relationship, but it just, if you're on this earth enough, on this earth long enough, and you're dialed in to other humans, then you realize you get a call from someone like that, and they say a couple critical phrases that you're like, that checks a box for me, that checks a box. Yeah. This is right. The time is now. And honestly, I was dealing with something huge and personal in my world at that time. We had a major life event with one of our children who was injured. And I was like, oh, this is a big yes to give right now. Sure. Because if I'm going to give a yes, because my name is professionally attached to a work product, and I have a lot of pride around that, So it's if I'm going to be here, I need to be here with 100%. So I need to give props to my husband too, because he helped tremendously with getting us to get this together in a visual format. It felt right to get a call from her at that time, and that's not well, give me 6 months. No, the time is now. Yeah. The time is now, and especially the time is now in the state, right?
Exactly.
There's a lot of things happening rapidly. Yeah. And I come from Illinois. It's a completely different game, completely different marketplace in terms of adult rec and in terms of the players there. And I've been here in the cannabis space for a couple years now. I was quiet. I was very, very quiet initially, and I've gotten a little more vocal. And professionally, that's had some repercussions for my husband and myself, because not everybody is on the bus, the cannabis bus yet, you know? Yeah. But this build felt right. The content felt right. The mission and sort of the head and the heart focused launch pad that Lynn wanted to have, that aligned with a lot of value systems that I had revamped sort of my LinkedIn bio, and I was like, okay, I'm going to leave these Easter eggs in here. And if anybody actually takes the damn time to read it, it's basically an open invitation to play with people who want to do good things while we're here. Right.
That's dope.
Yeah. So I don't know if she read that or if I just threw that out in the universe. I figured she does her homework.
Yeah, she does.
I know.
Yeah. Hats off to the articles. I was so pleased to see all of my nurse friends represented. Alicia and Jackie and Katie and Trisha, and wow, that was awesome. Thank you for that. You know that I always want to elevate our profession, so like that was really, I was wowed by that. So,
Yeah, they did great work.
Yeah, they did.
They really did, and yeah, I mean, for them all to say yes, you know, to take a chance to put also their professional creds out there, and yeah, and to just have, we've had conversations about this with regard to nurses sort of being left out of the conversations around the state as professionals.
Absolutely.
You know, with regard to advocacy and advisory committees and things like that being formed, and just the tremendous education that some of the writers have master's degrees in cannabis in our state, nurses with tremendous education levels, not seen around the nation, right here in our state of Minnesota. So it just felt right to sort of tap them and say, teach us.
Yeah,
you know,
I love it.
And just to really give them a platform to shine. You know, nurses are always the first ones people call when they have problems. You know, our families all, let's call her. She's a nurse. She knows what to do. You
They
know,
sure do.
And same with cannabis. You know, so why not have us sort of be, you know, on the front lines of dosing and helping people understand how different modalities can work with their bodies. So
I loved the tone of it too. I thought it spoke to people that were kind of maybe newer to cannabis. I think that's really important. And so I think that you guys really nailed that piece.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like that. So what do you do? How do you pick up the reins when Lynn calls you and is like, help me?
I'm going to start with the anecdote. You know, all of our college prep nonsense that we took, like the ACT and, you know, our AP classes and the SAT. Back in the dinosaur age, when I took the ACT, they sent us back professional recommendations, like fields that you should explore. And I was born in the Quad Cities. I'm a Midwest girl.
Okay.
I've lived in probably 3 states down in the Midwest. And they told me that I should be a farm planner. And I was so offended. I was so offended because I'm like, what kind of prejudicial nonsense? They just look at my birth city and they're like, okay, like we don't even need to assess or test. But I think I use that analogy as like, I'm a good big picture puzzle builder.
Okay.
You know, if I'm given a lot of irregular shapes, I know how to carve them down and put them together and make sense of it. So I think it was first the taking all the assets that Lynn had in play. So all of our contributors with great credentials. And honestly, that's, you know, if I really want to be honest too, that was very attractive to me when Lynn said, we're going to curate this conversation in an intelligent way, because I had been dragging my feet in partnering with anyone here, because that's what that's a conversation that I wanted to participate in. Sure. Sidestepping the marketing and the advertising language and some of the nonsense, or, you know, I'm a certified Ganjier too. So it's like, I did a deep dive. I wanted to be a subject matter expert about the plant to understand, you know, historical significance, political ramifications, what we're still dealing with, war on drugs, complete lack of awareness from our healthcare community. Really, it's not part of the education system.
Right.
And what I don't talk about publicly a lot, like talk about Lynn mentioning like women giving up their dreams. I was the first female in my family to go to college. So, you know, like navigating that foreign system, I equate to folks trying to navigate cannabis as a legal option for them to implement in their toolbox for health and wellness, right?
Sure.
So, like you said, making sure that our tone is accessible and approachable to novices, as well as people who are here but maybe have a lot of misinformation. So clarifying things, right? So, you know, I really think Bloom should be at every dispensary, and it should be the bag stuff right at the end. Like,
totally.
You're buying 1 or 2 products. Is this your first time in? Then you need this as well, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I like it. I love that concept. And I think you're right. When you said, though, this is the publication that you're going to pick up when you're at your doctor's office, I was like, hell yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's corrupt some minds.
Lynn and I were on a call with a potential sponsor because, we're trying to get creative because print is not dead, but print is not a moneymaker in terms of a business and a startup, which is what we're doing here as well.
Yeah.
So trying to think creatively in terms of our funding streams and, gaining support and growing support. And the feedback that we got from this other female founder, a CEO, she said, this speaks to me. She's like, this is the magazine that, like, if I'm in my chiropractor's office and my husband and I are getting adjustments and it's time to go and I'm still flipping through Bloom and I'm trying to finish an article and he's saying, hey, honey, let's go. She's like, no, I'm going to finish this or I'm going to steal it and I'm going to walk out,
Right.
So, yeah.
And they don't even have to. It's free.
No, it's free. There's a whole stack in the corner. Grab one and go.
Talk about some of the elements. Again, I just want to say how beautiful this is, like all of the artwork and the copy and the way it comes across. It's so gorgeous to me. Like almost like a Vogue, like it should be like a coffee table display, Talk about those elements and how you really wanted to bring those in and what that does and how we push cannabis and the destigmatizing of cannabis through those images.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we can start with the cover because I think, thank you for making that comment because that was my goal. So we nailed it, I think.
Yeah, you did.
Not that I want to dupe a reader or a potential reader, but we need to catch their eye, right?
Yep.
Like we're an unknown entity. No one's recognizing our name, our branding, anything. They don't know what we're about. The tagline, the plants, people, purpose, that covers us in a broad category kind of way. But cover art, we're not facing the industry. We're not a High Times. We're not a skunk magazine.
Fat Nugs.
We're not a Fat Nugs. Yeah, and I love all of those publications because they serve great needs. They've paved a path towards having conversations in this sector, well before legalization was even like breathed or talked about from coast to coast, right? Like those are the pioneers in terms of print, right? What we're trying to do is different. We're trying to have a conversation with a consumer base, right, that still is very naive around how they implement the plant in their life. So not a bait and switch, but like we need to have a little bit of a sexy cover, right, to catch people's attention.
I think I want to even say elegant.
Thank you.
It is very elegant. I feel like we need to show people a different light about cannabis. And so that's why, to me, that's very important.
Yep.
To have all those beautiful art aspects and to be like, holy shit, like this is real art here.
Yep.
It's a certain elegance that I think cannabis deserves. And I'm so glad to see it being portrayed in that way. So
thank you.
Yeah.
So that cover image is mine. That's my photography.
Okay.
That's
beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
That was my first love. I wanted to work for National Geographic. I wanted to travel the world because I'm also a curious person and wanted to story tell, but when I graduated college, the hiring market was just horrendous. So that was not a dream that could be fulfilled. But our theme for this first edition was pain. And so Lynn and I had a number of conversations of, how do we address a topic so heavy and so weighty for people? And honestly, with a immediate negative connotation, how do we flip that script a little bit and do something beautiful or elegant or draw an analogy or a metaphor where we can address the topic, but in sort of a unique filter, with a unique filter, right? So I used a rose as an example. And that's obviously art manipulated because that was not the rose that I got, that I took a photo of. But even our branding, like the purple is an intentional choice, know your audience. We're in Minnesota, Vikings, Prince, right?
Right.
But also like what purple means. Purple is power. And that's flower power is our tagline, right? So, and our feature article is about Matthew.
Yes, it is.
Rabideau. And
Raiden Labs.
Raiden, yep. And, our headline for that article was From Pain to Power. So I was like, our headline for the cover almost wrote itself in that regard.
What a great point of view for the overall concept to be pain. And then you have all these different points of view coming in as to like what that means and how cannabis can help us melt that away or how it helps heal us or,
Correct.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, beautiful.
So the analogy that I was drawing there is, geraniol, the terpene in roses, and starting to talk about some of the scientific elements, right, of the plant. Yeah. So really trying to, gently introduce some of these concepts to readers. We don't want to flood people. We don't want to turn people off. I don't want it to look like a dictionary,
Yeah.
right, or a scientific journal. We're not doing reviews of JAMA or PubMed here. Like, we need to synthesize things clearly and not dumb things down, but make them digestible. Right. Like, I'm meeting an audience where they're at, and where an audience at is right here at a state that's rolling out legalization is we need to learn.
Right.
We need to understand enough to know how to ask questions, what to do when we walk into those doors, right? And we're interacting with some of the personnel.
Well, and I think, Lynn, you always want to keep the focus on like being the healthcare go-to almost. So I see that coming across too. And I think you're right. Not everyone wants all that heavy science. No. They want it broken down to them in a way that they can understand. When we learn how to teach patients, we have to get down to like almost a 5th grade reading level sometimes. And then we have to do the therapeutic communication in order to make sure that they understood the message. Like, can you repeat it back to us? What was your understanding of that? What other questions do you have?
Yep.
What gaps can we fill in for you? So yeah, great job.
And I think too, with learning readiness, I think so much about when people are having significant pain or sleep deficit or whatever the symptom might be, just they might not have the capacity to really learn at that moment.
100%.
Right. But perhaps they could take that home, and then we get them to sleep better.
Yeah.
Feel better. They've got a product that can, help with their pain, and then maybe they'll pick the magazine up and say, "Oh, now I see why this worked with my body." And it's just so important to have that learning about the ECS endocannabinoid system for people who've never heard of it. I had never heard of it, after being through, a nursing program and a master's program, it's just not mentioned. And that's my other hope, is that, nurses and other healthcare providers pick it up or hear about it. They'll read, Dr. McConville's article explains it so clearly, and Jacqueline's touches, several articles touch on it, where nurses and other healthcare professionals can get an introduction and then find someone in the magazine to learn more. I mean, we're obviously, just as the Ganjier community also heavily represented in the magazine.
I saw,
we're out here educating constantly and available, for, networking, learning sessions, product consultations, all kinds of things.
I've always said that to me, nurses and Ganjiers really go hand in hand, because I feel like nurses really bring that medical aspect, and Ganjiers bring like so much, along with the ethos and along with the love of the plant and the, what I mean? Like, just really hold it up and put it on a pedestal. And I love that.
Elevate, like you said, like, elegant cover, but also like we're trying to elevate
for sure
the conversation a little bit too, and guide it in the direction of why I think a lot of us are here, and maybe even decades old consumers are here. They just don't have a label or a medical card attached to why they consume, right? There is a lot of us here that I think that all consumption is for medical reasons, and we just we don't acknowledge it, right? Just like other people turn to other substances to turn themselves up or down or left or right, whether that's caffeine or alcohol or, whatever, name your substance, right? That affects our metabolism.
But I think the Ganjier fit is so nice too, because when you just think about evaluating a strain that you're going to sit down and enjoy, it's almost like a religion to me, the way you evaluate it and break it down and you smell it and you really want to get the taste of it. And, it's such a deep analytical process, but at the same time, it's just like, it's visceral because it like goes through you.
Yep.
Yeah. I I have a lot of respect for Ganjiers.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of nerds. There's a whole, we're just a hot mess of nerds here. But the word that Lynn and I have been throwing around about, some plant substances and is just the functional nature, right? And so what's the definition of functional? It's about like using something in an intentional way, right? That's driving some process or not driving a process. And I think, I don't know. I'm wondering if we can start using that term around cannabis as well. At some point. Like I haven't heard that, but I feel like, there's some intention. There's some intentional use here, and I think that us talking more about that is really like a strategic target for me in terms of conversations and content.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think intentional use, I think that's out there. I think people really are trying to be more intentional with their use of all plant medicines.
But with a novice audience, though,
Got
specifically.
You. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like those dots are a little far apart. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just the stigma thing. I think, people are like, oh my God. I remember like suggesting to my dad, he had really bad pain before he passed away. I'm like, Dad, why don't you try some cannabis? He was like, are you trying to kill me? I'm like, no, just want you to be comfortable.
Quite the contrary.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah. So we have a lot of work to do still.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that, the conversations that we curate and hopefully the places that we can, the unassuming places that we can be, right? That people will walk by and start to learn and obviously grow and, perhaps expand their universe of options. Mm-hmm. That's the goal.
For sure. I mean, sadly, I think some people finally come to cannabis because, they've tried everything else, right? Mm-hmm. And they just they can't get good sleep. But the minute they try that gummy, they're sleeping away. So
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, I'm sitting here with two medical professionals. Can we use the words harm reduction as well?
Yeah,
absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? We use it quite a bit, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that's another term or like another thing that we can probably focus on more too in the future with a general audience is, these things that you think are perfectly safe and that we can buy in our local drugstore, with repeated use, with chronic use, there's ramifications and potential downsides, whether it's cardiovascular or gastrointestinal or, I'm just running through my NSAIDs right now, right?
Yeah. I knew what you were talking about the second you said that. I think I've seen more patients on dialysis from NSAIDs than, anything else, and so harm reduction when used in that manner makes a lot of sense to me,
Yeah, it really does.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember at Lynn and I were at HempFest about a month ago or so, and Rachel Parmalee from ACNA was there, and she talked about the word harm reduction and how we're, as nurses, one of the philosophies was that we needed to kind of teach towards harm reduction. Like, we already know our patients are using cannabis, so let's show them a different way. Let's teach them how to use topicals or consumables or whatever. And she's like, I want harm reduction to go away. Sometimes I think people need to have a little puff, and I think that's a-okay. I love the way the attitude around cannabis and harm reduction specifically is even starting to change within the medical community and within the nurses anyway. So I was really inspired by that, actually. So I think
she's spot on, especially, the way I think about things has changed so much, and especially the last 3 years. I think of harm reduction, and I think, how can we, stop the harm from big pharma?
Yeah, exactly.
Big insurance. Right. That's where my mind starts going when I think about harm reduction and some of the damage that's caused by some of these big systems that you and I've worked on the front lines really, and saw some of. Some of these things and just the repercussions of that. And, so.
And I lost it.
Can I just jump on that? Because
please.
I had two special guests, and I hail from Chicago, so I'm the remote member of the Bloom team, an honorary Minnesotan.
You certainly are.
My 84-year-old aunt jumped on a plane with her daughter, my cousin, and came to visit me last week because neither one of them had ever been to Chicago. And it was a perfect time because my cousin was switching jobs, working from a state health agency job to taking a position under Health and Human Services. She's starting soon. So big work for her under Child and Family Services, which is also equally tough. But my aunt has been a decades and decades long opioid consumer, and she talks about it openly. So I don't think she would have a problem with me sharing, but she has a level of curiosity because she lives in the state of Delaware, and so they have medical use there, and she tried, but she did not get good guidance or good success. And so she and I have had a number of conversations about let's try again, and let's inverse those levers, right, of dosage, right? Let's try to titrate down and implement some other options here, right? And she was open to it, so I'm anxious to have that conversation too. So I think we can maybe rebrand harm reduction in a different way.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
Yeah,
but
I like it.
yeah, I mean, and just talking about all those side effects, right, of that chronic use, and God, just the withdrawal effects. Can we even talk about that? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you guys have been on the front lines of that, and you see the ramifications of that in a patient population, right? So yeah, that's huge to me, and I think for most folks, they just don't even know that there's another option.
Yeah. Or
that is a little more delicate.
Yeah, that's for sure.
right.
I just looked up opiate taper guidelines
Awesome.
through NIH, I think, had a protocol.
Okay.
You know, for me, sometimes it's nice to sort of see, you know, I'm always kind of interested in the literature and, you know, when I'm reading my books, could someone just give me a protocol? Give me the
Exactly.
dose, you know,
Yeah.
like I'm so, you know, you give someone a Flexeril, you got 5 milligrams or 10 milligrams or,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And so for me, it you know, I'm always, and we know with cannabis, it's so personalized and so
Yes.
individualized, you know,
Yep.
you're never gonna, you know, it just, what did you eat? What's the pH contents of your stomach? You know, where are you, who are you with? Where,
How
you know,
much exercise did you have?
like
Yeah.
all of those
Yeah, yeah,
variables,
yeah.
right? But that being said, I did last week come across an opiate taper protocol. And I was like,
That's
I
awesome.
immediately emailed it to Trisha, who's a cannabis nurse, and I said, "Have you seen this? Like, we gotta laminate it. You know, like, what are we gonna do with it?" And
Who did it? Do you remember?
I've got it saved.
Okay.
Yeah, I bookmarked it, and then she said, "Well, you'd be excited to know that I believe it's Cannabis
Yeah.
just put out protocols for several different. I think it was MS."
Awesome.
She mentioned between 4 and 6 different clinical conditions that they actually came out with treatment guidelines.
Well, even in one of the articles, Jacqueline lays
Yeah.
out some
Mhm.
guidelines for dosing. So
Yeah.
I was really happy to see
I know,
that. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. And you know, with her education, you know, having a master's as an
Right.
NP, and then a second master's,
Right.
you know, who's got better training to put it out there based on current research, you know,
Exactly.
and it was wonderful because all of her resources, you know, were included in the article, which I think is important because it gives, you know, credibility and
Right.
People can look the article up,
Right.
you know, so I think that was additionally what we wanted to have in terms of people being able to look things up and see, you know, for themselves
Yeah.
that where that came from.
For sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. Again, that trusted source, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's like one of the big questions that I get from people. Well, how do I know who has good information? You know, so
Oh,
I
yeah.
think we need to be, you know, putting those trusted sources forward and saying, hey, look into this Ganjier program. They're not going to steer you wrong.
Right.
You know, if you have a complex medical history, though, maybe check out Lynn Wachtler and Trisha Brown and, you know, so or Jackie Higgins as your trusted source. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the one thing that I see throughout the nurse community and healthcare community is more of a desire to speak to and really get out there in conferences. And it's been really nice to see some of our trained professionals speaking more,
Yeah.
getting out there, you know, doing a keynote speech and really introducing the topic to, you know, nurses
Right.
that haven't been exposed. And I was very proud. This went out to, I believe, 120 critical care nurses,
Nice.
which was a groundbreaking, really. So that was just really neat to see, and efforts of Jacqueline, who's writing in the magazine, and you know, she didn't stop there. She went to a co-op, and you can find it at the Wedge.
Nice.
Yeah. So more co-ops to come, and you know, it's just a neat way to get it out there. You know, co-op, but also at medical conferences. You know,
Yeah.
so a lot of people have made just. I mean, this has been such a blessing to see the community come together and say, "Let me help. I got you." Like, I'm going to go deliver to some chiropractors I know. And for me as a woman, I'm very independent, and I don't like to ask for help like some of us.
Right.
I'm going to do everything myself. And, you know, due to some of my own, you know, chronic pain and some PTSD, I've been, and, you know, being more of a mature woman as, you know, I'm needing to say yes. I'm
Yeah.
needing to say, you know what? Thank you for carrying that table for me. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. You know,
Listen.
thank you. You know, thank you for putting that in my car.
We
You know,
definitely can delegate
Yeah.
things.
Yeah,
We're
like,
supposed to do that.
I know it's hard though. I mean,
It is hard.
it's hard, right?
hard.
It's
Yeah.
you know, we're socialized and conditioned to do all of it. You know, are we gonna ask anyone to do the dishes? No, we're just gonna do everything and then feel resentful.
Yeah.
You know, like
that is
nope.
that is the parallel of deprogramming that we're
Yes.
talking about,
Mhm.
right?
For sure.
You know, so
Yeah,
it resonates a lot with us.
yeah.
And, you know, that's like the definition of help is really what we're doing here too. Like that's the baseline equivalent of education, right? Like, I needed help when I first started facing this, right?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, oh my God, where do I look? So like, I have the skill set to do the deep dive and the research and then synthesize and, you know, create those sort of hierarchies of like what's relevant, flush out the stuff that I know that is pseudoscience and fake news and whatever we want to label it as, right? Your average reader doesn't have the time, the interest, the patience. Like that's just not how most people are wired, right?
Yeah.
You know, so I know that I'm an anomaly in that sense, but that doesn't make that need irrelevant, right? Like,
True.
so I really feel like we have a great opportunity here to be translators, be really good communicators, and amplify, you know, new science that's coming out. And you both know this from your professional education that like new science that is the knowledge is needed now in the marketplace,
Right.
Because the marketplace is moving faster than clinical practice and application, right?
Yes,
So,
it is.
and I say that from someone who wanted to have a medical career and was that girl who didn't ask for help in college and washed out of a pre-med program and then thought she was crazy enough to maybe entertain that thought again 10 years ago. And so being the mature woman that I was too, not fearful of like calling a dean of a med school in Texas and going like, tell me about your lifestyle education credits, talk to me about nutrition, talk to me about the ECS. We do one nutrition class. We don't teach the ECS, da, 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 da. And I was like, well, then why am I going to spend $500,000 in like the next 10 years of my life doing this to be able to face how many patients a day in clinical practice times X number of, so it's like, this is a way that I get to have that conversation with more people and educate versus the billable 20 minutes that we get per insurance, right, coverage for their one annual visit. And then whether or not that patient applies any of that knowledge or use, you won't know until they come back in a year later, you know?
Yeah.
So
This is a good representation of, like I said, trusted sources of information on cannabis, but it's super well-rounded. We have beautiful articles from Elizabeth Sage. We have an article in there from the young woman that did the jewelry making. Talk a little bit about how you selected people to submit articles.
can we flip open to that double
Of
page
course.
spread? Actually, those are our pink pages.
Okay.
And that was a really intentional and kind of a fun yin yang double page spread layout.
And when the show airs, we will have the media for this too.
Awesome.
Just so you know. Yeah.
Like we're talking about females, right? We're talking about paths and opportunities and options and expectations of us by society. So I want to hear Lynn talk a little bit about selecting Sarah and Elizabeth, but
I'm getting there.
yeah, you'll find it.
But, there's Jen Riza's in here,
Yep.
with her legal ease. And this is the pages that
Yep.
Angelique is referring to.
Yep. So we're going from a science page, and Sarah, you pronounce her last name Schutte, right?
Yep.
Sarah Schutte, who's a certified soil scientist. And she's in her 40s. She doesn't have a family. She mentioned in her article that she had, she's an auntie to like dozens of her siblings' kids, right?
Yeah.
So, and we think about like how our society is structured, like that's more normal than not around the globe, right? Communal family supports, right?
Yes.
Not everyone has children, but like we have this weird expectation, this checklist, right? Especially in American culture where it's like, got to get the education, got to get the job, got to have the perfect thing, got to have the kids, got to do it all. And I just love the yin yang of that. And actually the thread between Sarah's life and Elizabeth's life and world is the plant. And how they both use it as a tool in different ways, right? There we go.
Love it.
Can we just snap in here? How hot are the mics?
I love that. Yeah, thank you for making that connection.
Yep.
I know a big part of this for you, Lynn, is advocacy work around veterans. So talk about that. Talk about your mission to bring veterans' voices forward.
Yeah, I think for me, having worked in veterans healthcare for almost a decade, it just and my own family too. This week I lost my uncle. He was almost 100, just shy of 100 years old.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. He was a World War II and Korean War vet. And then his younger brother, 98, also a veteran, Korean War veteran, and my dad, veteran as well. And then their dad served in World War I and was injured. And my brother also served, as he said, I've been in wars all over the globe. He served for 26 years, and my other couple uncles were in Vietnam. So I come from a very long history of people who served and really put this country first and set their own lives aside. And so I've always admired what they've done and what they've sacrificed. And I was on a temporary assignment through my last company that I had, and they had a need at the state VA system, and so I went to work there, and I just fell in love with the stories. And I think you've got some veterans in your circle. You're not in the minute you meet them.
You are not.
No, they're sus. Like,
yes. You got to get into the circle of trust.
Yes. So it took a little bit, but honestly, their stories, I was just, I loved my job so much, and I just loved doing the work of advocating for them and being their primary provider. And I was so proud of doing that, and because I didn't serve myself, it really felt like in some regard that was my service too,
Sure.
And long story short, I'm no longer working in that job. Frontlines really took quite a toll, and I left, and I just, as many nurses in this country, just really went through a long period of healing from burnout, and just wondering, could I ever practice again? And certainly, could I ever practice again at that very high level of being the only primary provider, at my work and making those split life or death decisions on what I'm going to do in the second. And I really went through a grieving process and really just a tremendous dark night of the soul is really the best way to describe it. And I think, and I think as I look around, other people are going through, dark night of the soul, but there were the nurses around me that were all in similar. So many of us all left at the same time. I think there was probably an exodus of, close to 10 nurses at the same time. And just the recovery process and the camaraderie between the nurses and just wondering, could I still somehow incorporate caring for veterans into my new life?
Sure.
And then as we sort of developed the concept of the magazine, I was like, this is a way to still tell stories that make a difference and have an impact. And gosh, when you talk to them, I felt just like I was back at my job, you know, like, because there's such healing power in therapeutic storytelling, you know, and it really was healing for me as much as, you know, but I want to continue to shine light on our veterans' voices and what they've done for this country and how they're able to move forward with the PTSD and having taken the combat cocktail and all of the challenges they have. And, you know, so it's still a way to stay connected and still, you know, find meaning and purpose as a mature woman who's, you know, this is, I don't want to say it's my last rodeo, but, you know, like, I mean, you know, like you start thinking about that, right? And your legacy and impact and those kind of things, I think.
For sure.
And so it will always be a part of me, and I think just part of my family, and, you know, and taking care of, you know, I don't caregive per se for my dad and his brothers. My dad is the caregiver for the brothers. But it's still a way to, you know, just stay connected. And yeah.
I spoke with Matt at your guys' launch party last night, and he talked about resiliency and transmuting his pain, and you nailed it. I think you brought his voice right through. And, you know, just to speak, you know, we've talked a lot about the healthcare providers and like how accomplished they are and everything, but like the scientists like Matt and Sarah and I'm not super familiar with Shane from Timber Ghost, but, you know, just there's some really brilliant minds out here. And I think I heard you talking about that last night, how we come from this unique community where we bring all these things and, you know, we all kind of do our piece, and it's like a ripple effect. And, you know, tell me what you thought about the contributors. Give me like a memorable story, like from when you were getting the magazine going.
I mean, they all spoke to me for different reasons, right?
Yeah.
In all those different lanes that, you know, as Lynn and I were having some onboarding conversations, you know, to probably kind of vet each other out and make sure that we were aligned in terms of mission and vision here as well. I think first I want to just talk about like a universal thread is just authentic voices, you know, like this is straight talk. This is not fiction. This is the real. And, you know, the credentials after their names are the icing on the cake. And I think that's the validity that we need for a novice audience too, to be like, oh, these are smart people.
Right.
They've got symbols after their names, you know? I was really moved by the fact, and this was a conversation like dovetailing off of Matthew, you know, that was the first time that I met a lot of these contributors in person. So that's an emotional moment for me because I already feel like I have intimate knowledge of their worlds, right?
Sure.
Matthew's story is very revealing. Even Sarah Schute's story is very revealing because, you know, as females, that's a very personal thing to share.
Yes, it is.
Right? That we feel vulnerable in sharing. Like we've done all these massively accomplished things, but we still feel less than because society deems us less than because we didn't check one of those boxes, you know? So, you know, my first statement to Matthew was thank you for trusting us to try to do your story with a level of honor and justice that is deserved because of such a significant loss in his world, you know? And that resonates with me. I know that resonated with Lynn. We're both mothers, you know, like specifically in my world, I just shared, you know, like we went through a significant thing this summer with my son. So like that was very visceral for me. And so I was talk about like hook in a fish mouth. Like, I'm like, okay, this is meaty content that I can work with, and that we can build something around. Yeah. And honestly, Sarah's and I just love Elizabeth Sage is my friend. So she's a fellow certified Ganjier,
Yes,
and she's the reason that Lynn and I know each other, so like gratitude, ample amounts of gratitude there, because that's honestly what we as females do a lot. Unspoken, we do the silent passing of opportunities around amongst ourselves because those doors don't open automatically. They just don't professionally. So I love Elizabeth's voice, and I love her willingness to openly talk about being in this industry, being a parent, being a geriatric parent, as she talks about, like that's huge for me too. Like our goal is here normalization, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So normalization covers all these facets of our lives, right? Things that, my generation, like, I didn't publicly talk about the fact that I was a mother in any professional realm. I've revised my bio now to include that I have 3 kids because that's important.
Yes, it is.
And if we want to flip the script, like when I decided to first freelance and not work full time anymore, because I'm doing the juggle, right, of raising 3 kids in a big metropolitan area where, like, as I said, we didn't have community or family. We're the modern society family. We both moved into a major metropolitan area for professional opportunities. And here we are with no community and no resources. And every time that you need to leave the house for an hour, that's what, $20 out of your pocket, $30 for a sitter, so some things you just have to get creative. And so I was starting to consult and freelance, and I got a job by translating in a high level, featuring like a marketing job from a firm out of New York City, doing some research for Nike, by basically translating parenting skills in my resume. And someone else, it was another mother who was the hiring manager. She's like, I totally caught on what you were doing. That was so sly. So sly. And so like brownie points, she's like, you're hired.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's things like that, right?
Yeah. We have a lot of tangible skills just from not even being in the workforce. You know what I mean? Like we're the caretakers of the world.
We are. We are.
So
that's a good word, because I kind of feel like Lynn and I are bringing a caregiver approach to creating this content.
Yeah.
A lot of care, a lot of thought, a lot of thought.
It resonates. I just want to say that. I love the Indigenous piece too. I know that's really important to you, Lynn.
Yeah.
Especially in our community here in Minnesota. Well, all over the Midwest, everywhere.
Yeah.
That those voices need to be heard. And that has always been my thing about this podcast. Like, we need to hear from some other people, some other voices that are maybe getting passed over once in a while. We need to hear those voices are important. It's important for people to hear those perspectives. And it really just brings in that whole person care of wellness. And I think that was much needed. So I hope, and I know 100% in my mind that going forward that's going to be a piece of Bloom and how it moves forward. So
Well, think about the history of medicinal plants.
Right.
And we were talking, you met Dana from Hetty.
Yep.
And when I picked up her beverages, just from spending time in the with the Mendota, Dakota, I've learned about not just tobacco or sage, but some of the other medicinal plants and properties. And when I picked up her beverage, I looked at the cans and I just like, oh, I love this, just proud of those, medicinal properties. And then you taste her beverage and you just, I'm just obsessed. I'll just say it. Like the beauty of the product she made and the flavors and, just all of it and how she presents herself and her knowledge. And so we will be telling more stories too, and just highlighting, we have several Indigenous women and men who are out doing great things.
Yes, we do. Yep.
Yeah. And I just want to showcase all their products. And, I continue to be a student and just shut my mouth and learn,
for sure.
You go to a sweat lodge, they're using those sacred plants and it's a very spiritual experience, and if you just be quiet, the wisdom of the elders is so profound. And, to go to those ceremonies and sit with an 82-year-old elder who's telling the story about, being raised speaking their language and then being shipped off to school and, and the things that happen to them when they
atrocities.
Yes. And, I think we're still, in exploring, ways we can come together and work together and what that looks like and how we support each other. And like we've been talking about tonight, the ripple effect of, just spending time together, and for me, it's really about my family, when they came from Germany, settled in Mendota, which is the birthplace, they're, not too far from Fort Snelling, but that area by St. Peter the Church. And that's a very, that's where the two rivers come together, is the birthplace of the Lakota, Dakota people. And so they're just teaching me all these things, and it's been wonderful. And so my own passion, of course, is to share what I learned, and so we can do that a little bit in the magazine. And I'm just hoping that other people will feel like, I want to learn more too, or gosh, maybe I should get off Instagram and get out in nature.
Right.
Like ground, they're the original teachers of grounding principles, of going in nature and connecting with animals and spirit, So I think some of these principles are going, in the next several years, in the next decade, we're going to be returning to some of these native practices. And think about it. They're free, right?
Yeah.
You don't need your insurance card to go outside.
Right.
No, you do not.
So.
No, you do not.
Yeah.
To reset your autonomic nervous system.
Yeah, exactly. And the power of drumming, just the power of sound to, to heal your body. And I'm really passionate about those kind of practices too. And we know these things affect the endocannabinoid system.
They do. Yeah. They're much needed.
We're sitting here as 3 females, all doing independent endeavors here. And we're, 2 out of 3 partners here are female, and 12 out of 13 contributors were female. Diverse voices and diverse perspectives, I think, make a more robust conversation always.
Agreed.
And I think that a big goal of mine is building bridges and not tearing them down, especially when an industry is pretty nascent. So I think this is a together farther kind of conversation as well that I continually want to bring back, and that covers the health and wellness lane. It also covers like building businesses in this space, right? Like everyone is under-resourced and margins are pretty slim. So there are lessons to learn from everyone here.
Yeah. I went to a really great, Lynn, you were there at that leadership conference they had a few weeks back, and, just kind of identifying those resources out in the community. Like, okay, how can I, what other ways can I, get resources or pull people together? Or, I love those conversations because, it gets you thinking outside of like the normal, okay, well, I have to go to the bank and apply for, I have to apply for grants or,
Right.
There's people that are sitting next to us again with brilliant minds and, tangible skills that we can key into and they can be useful.
Yeah.
More collaboration.
Yeah.
I think that's the other, we were talking about that. I think we're in a time where we're going to see more collaboration.
Yes.
Why should every small business reinvent, everything from marketing, legal, a shared compliance person makes a lot of sense. Right. One really good compliance person can probably take care of 2 or maybe even 3 small businesses,
right.
And just streamline systems, automate as much as you can, makes a lot of sense. So,
yeah, we are definitely entering the sharing economy phase of development. Yeah.
Talk about some of the challenges that you think you'll be facing with stigma breaking and how the magazine can help bust those barriers. I know we've touched on it a little bit, but expound upon it.
Well, can I just address the elephant in the room?
What is it?
So we have this disconnect, right? We don't have federal legalization.
Yeah.
But we have state-bounded legalization, right? We have conversations that we want to have around health and wellness, but we have regulations that say this must be a 21 and up audience, when Lynn and I, and you know, that there are children affected that could really benefit from plant medicine as well. So I think the delicate dance that Lynn and Eric and I have to navigate is like where our boundaries are legally in terms of being a publisher and a publication that's doing a lot of education to a novice population, like I said, and making sure that, you know, we continue to be a trusted source of information, that we can maybe push the envelope a little bit, but not suffer the consequences of doing so, you know. So that's an exploratory journey that I think is going to be my head challenge as, you know, editor-in-chief and CEO of us. So yeah.
What's next? What other voices do you want to hear from?
We have a couple things, exciting things teed up.
Okay.
You want to talk a little bit about Daniel?
Yeah. So we've found some great voices for our next issue. I don't know how much you want me to say.
Just a little
smidgy.
just because
give us a smidgy.
Like, you know, we're coming up on Black History Month, and like we've been talking, like we want more diverse voices here. We want diverse perspectives, and we want to be a platform for that, right? But we also want to have smart conversations with the readership. So, you know, we are hunting and pecking and not just facing current industry, but, you know, people that are coming and entering the space too. So this is what's exciting to me. You know, it makes us attractive as a publication where we're not just regurgitating information that's out there already, but we're actually trying to be at the forefront of conversations. So
yeah, I love it. Thank you for it's important work. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and then we've got someone near and dear to our heart is going to share her story. So she's working on it. She told Angelique and I yesterday she's about 3/4 of the way done with her story,
which is huge because, like I said, you know, we're asking people to share very, very personal parts of their world with us, right? Because these are not to be solicitous, but to draw in an audience to understand, like, some of this couldn't be more personal for some of us here, right? And not all of us feel comfortable talking about it publicly. So those who are willing to do so, you know, this is profoundly instructional to folks who don't know, right? Have we shared what the theme is yet for next issue?
Oh, there we go.
Can we do that?
Yeah, let's do it. So our main theme, so this current issue that is in market right now, the theme was pain. So there is a thread of pain being discussed right through a lot of the content. And actually that's how Lynn got me to jump on, like without like even an exhale of like a yes, I'm in. Because that's something that I struggle with too, you know? Yeah. I'm a former athlete. So like, this has been something I've been dealing with since my teenage years.
Sure.
And not navigating successfully with even, you know, Western practices or alternative practices. So this plant has been a profound tool for me to manage and sustain. And like we said, doing something as simple as like sleeping well and how much that affects someone, you know? But the current theme is pain. The next theme is cancer.
Wow.
So we're not dancing lightly on topics, but like these are reasons why a lot of people turn to the plant.
Sure.
And so, you know, our introduction here is like, let's introduce them to the plant earlier and not as a last resort.
Yeah.
Right. Which you guys know as medical professionals, like that's a Hail Mary of a pass, right? When your body's at that state.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you for being intentional about that. I think it is really important to be out ahead of things and to get the conversations going at least, you know, like there's other ways. Let's talk, you touched on a little bit about your own personal relationship with cannabis. Would you be willing to talk more about that?
Yeah, sure. Definitely consumed recreationally, like a lot of us do, you know, experimental kind of thing, but was not part of my world. Was not part of my world when I was a young mother, pregnancy, nursing, and you know what you know, like man, if I had had that as a tool. I had horrendous morning sickness. So if I add up the months that I was vertical versus months that I was horizontal versus vertical, like that's like a year and a half of my life that I could have gotten back. And that's controversial to say that because, we don't have a lot of clinical data around that, but we can look to other cultures like Jamaica.
Yes, we can.
There's some great studies that have come out of that country. No, it really wasn't until this past decade, and it was a little catch your breath kind of moment. Personally, I had 3 weird mammograms, and I thought I was going to get a breast cancer diagnosis, and that aligned with Illinois rolling out adult rec legalization. So that's my home state, and my husband suggested it honestly because I was having I am a type A independent person, and talk about not knowing how to ask for help or where to go for help, and really kind of melting from the inside out, right? And finding some new, just like other females, didn't think that consumption, combustion was my method of consumption. So finding some alternative low dose product formats initially. And because I wasn't a consumer, my tolerance was very low, so talking about onboarding on dosing like that. And for me, that was experimental. I didn't have any dosing recommendations back then. So, it was just a remarkable shift, right? Where you think that your world is topsy-turvy, and that provides some grounding and stability. So that was my on-ramp. And then me being the curious cat that I am, I'm like, well, I need to learn more about this. And where's the information, and why isn't anyone talking about it, and what's going on, And that was coinciding with me still thinking that I wanted to apply to med schools at that time frame. So, I was doing clinical shadowing, and that was, I had just shadowed a breast surgeon. So I knew what that BI-RAD score meant. Yeah. And I really was, can I swear on this podcast? Yes. I was scared shitless. I really was, and and that was also at the beginning of COVID. So I didn't have good options to get in for a quick appointment. So I had to wait 6 months for a biopsy to get a yay or a nay. And so it was during that time frame. That was during that time frame of me thinking, holy shit, and literally my husband and I having to sit down with our 3 boys and saying, hey, this is what mom's going through. And having to have that conversation in a preventative way with your kids is huge, because it's okay, everybody brace for impact. This might be coming. And luckily, it didn't, So I'm I feel like a good friend of mine, male friend, emotionally intelligent male friend, said to me, I got the good news, and my body still felt, what was the phrase that you used? Something in the night?
The dark night.
Oh, dark night of the soul kind of.
Soul.
I was still having a dark night of the soul kind of moment. I'm what is going on with this? The head knows the coast is clear, but what is happening in this system right now? And my friend said, well, he's you still have that feeling of you were stepping off the curb, the bus was coming, but somebody grabbed your shirt and pulled you back on the sidewalk really quick. And I was oh, thanks for using, figurative language so Angelique would understand. Thank you. But I was yeah. And I was stuck in that. So I would say also the plant helped me navigate the post news, the good news, and that's completely illogical when you talk about it that way, right? At least it seems like it to me, but it's no, that's how we're wired. Talk about getting stuck in a fight or flight.
Oh, yeah.
Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn are the 2 other Fs that I always like to throw in, right? And that's really where I was. So I started to backpedal away from that Western medicine, thinking I needed to get that MD or DO after my name so that I can speak, and so that people will pay attention to this new knowledge that I have. And also my background, my father's an alternative practitioner. He's a chiropractor. So, it's I only embraced Western medicine when I got married. My father-in-law was a juvenile diabetic. And my other anchor to Minnesota is the fact that when we were a young family, I was coming up here to the Mayo Clinic to visit him multiple times. He was a double transplant recipient, and the Mayo Clinic did both. He got a new kidney and a new pancreas. So,
wow.
And, his life expectancy was diagnosed at age 11, I think. You might live to see age 40. And after those, you know, he lived into his 70s. So like we felt like we got 3 extra gift decades with him. So I know that there's a better way. I know that East and West can coexist, that we can learn from natural practices and Indigenous practices, but we're not taught it. It's not intuitive. It's not passed down from our older generations anymore, right? So there's like a remarkable learning space here that like I feel like Lynn and I can populate and have like really interesting, like I said, building those bridges between different knowledge sets and different cultures and different voices, and letting our audience kind of go on that journey themselves, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing such a personal piece of your story. And,
Thank you.
And how you came to cannabis.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. It seems insane sometimes because it's not easy for all of us, right? There's repercussions for sure.
Yeah, it is.
Personally and professionally.
Yeah.
And I like to talk about that too, you know?
It's really hard to talk about it at work. There's still a lot of stigma, you know, amongst healthcare professionals. You know, when you talk about cannabis, you're like, "Wow, those drugs," or you know, like you'll smell someone, you know, wafting down the hall, and they'll be like, "Oh, you know," eye roll, and it's like they're accessing their medicine actually.
Right.
So, I was doing a chart prep for someone the other day, and we have to list their medications, and one of the meds was medical cannabis, and I just took off medical and I just put cannabis. That's your medicine.
Yep.
We don't have to make it so clinical.
Yep.
Like if that's what works for you, that's what works for you. I don't know if I was right or wrong in that, but I did it. So yeah, that's where we are.
Thank you for all you do.
Thanks.
Just you know, giving us a platform and a voice to speak and, you know, teach and connect with people. It's so great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's always, like I said, always one of my goals to elevate our profession. And again, so much admiration and respect for what Ganjiers do and how they study and their knowledge base and how they can really guide people in so many different ways. We, you know, watched Ghislaine last night do her presentation, and you know, you think about Elizabeth Sage with her beautiful blogs, and like she's such a prolific writer, and you know, so yeah, I really appreciate the Ganjier community a lot too. So it's a perfect blend here, guys, of Ganjier and nursing.
Thank you. Yeah. We're doing our best to elevate the conversation, like I said, and that requires us to, well, Lynn has some background in headhunting, and it's about like crawling through the forest and finding those unique people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so lastly, the publication, just talk a little bit about it. I know it's quarterly, so tell people how they can access it, where they can find it.
We are in how many locations now? Are we in the 50s?
I think close to that.
Yeah.
So dispensaries, most dispensaries in the Twin Cities are having are stocking for a stockus, and then like we said, the Wedge. We're working on some more of those places like that, and then we will eventually put on the website a full list of where they can pick it up.
Awesome.
We will probably be talking more about subscription. A number of people have reached out and to me and said, I want this mailed to me. Please make that happen.
Yes.
So we'll be chatting more about that.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Make it easy for people, especially, you know, we didn't talk much about the ADA component in the magazine, but that's a big, Angelique's just attention to detail. If you notice, that print is a little bit larger.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I know. I was like, oh my gosh, I can actually read that.
Right.
I don't need to grab my cheaters.
I didn't need my glasses to read that. Actually, yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. So the ADA
Good
component.
call.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah.
So mobility issues, I think having a subscription option will be great for people too.
If we really want to talk like so we are free circulation because like I said, this is about getting information and messaging into the most novice hands and heads and hearts that we can. it was really important to me to think about what is our target demographic. You know, we probably scaling and skewing slightly older, so like 35 to 75, which is, you know, also paralleled to like the most growing population of those trying to implement cannabis and trying to access it and trying to navigate it. And, you know, as we all are well aware of, like not getting terribly helpful information at all of points of sale, right? Because the young folks behind the counter also don't have much information or guidance to offer. So that's where we bridge that divide, right? But it was intentional for me to make this as accessible as possible, really thinking about that population and what their needs are. And selfishly, one of my sons has a mild form of dyslexia. So even thinking about a font choice to make sure that it's weighted appropriately for those who have trouble reading, you know, so, and I'm not sure that a lot of print publications think about that. You know, I pulled a lot of examples out as I was trying to get some graphic design and some creative direction together after I said yes to Lynn. And I thought, this is something that I need to be mindful of. So between intentional color palette choices for color blindness to font choices to the actual size, we had one of our contributors say, can I reduce the font size next time so I can include more words? And I said, I'm so sorry, but no, because this is important to me, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just some of the wayfinding too, if I can just call some of this out.
Yeah.
Like our table of contents, you know, we are, you know, this is about how we're trying to guide the conversation, you know, in these areas of listening, listening to stories first so that we can learn and then we can implement it in our lives.
Love it.
So very simple, you know, and primary colors, you know, this is primary information that we need, right?
Yeah.
And even some of our vertical elements here, you know, contents, things like this, you know, part of our mission statement is that we're trying to sit at this challenging corner of Main Street and the regulated plant industry, which is where your consumers are, right? So these are sort of, I consider these our guideposts and our signposts here.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So local.
I love it. Oh, thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. How can our community support you and support the North Bloom?
Well, we're a free circulation. So, you know, first off, we're ad revenue supported. So I would say that if you like the conversation that we're trying to curate, you know, please advertise with us because we started with a 36-page magazine. I'd like to grow it. Yeah. So we need advertisers and we need supporters. And if you have bigger pockets than that and you want to talk about sponsoring content, I say reach out to us at pitch@the.North.Bloom or advertising@the.North.Bloom. And let's have a conversation.
Awesome. I love it. Where can just a regular Joe Schmo find you guys? Is there like an online element? I know you guys are on Instagram, kind of pushing that out.
Yeah, we're just rolling out some of those assets now. You know, our primary and our first build was getting the print publication in hands, right?
Yeah.
And in the marketplace. And then, you know, we're a small founder team, so we want to do things right. We're not trying to do things fast. So yeah, we have an Instagram presence. The handle is @the.North.Bloom. And our website placeholder basically right now, but you know, there's definitely an area there to fill out if you want to get on our list.
One of the ways I thought of how the community could support you is if patients went to their doctors and said, "Hey, you guys really need to get that North Bloom magazine in your
oh yeah,
there you go. We would love
in your waiting room."
We would love to hear from clinicians.
So
that would be wonderful.
Yeah, let's get that. Let's get that rolling, guys.
That's amazing. Thank you for that, Mom.
Of course. Yeah, I love you guys so much. Thank you for joining me and being here. I'm just in awe of how dynamic both of you are in your own special way. And then to see you come together and make this beautiful publication, I'm speechless almost. Yeah, it's beautiful. I appreciate it so much. So thank you. And to my audience, you can join Conversations with Kush on Instagram, please, and YouTube. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe for more content. And have a great night.